We're beginning to draw our series on Revelation to a close. We're beginning to draw to a close this focus on the second coming of Jesus and understanding it in a little bit more depth. Revelation is a really interesting book. It's probably the only book in the Bible that actually says, "Blessed are those who read it and take the time to understand it." And I hope that by doing so, it's helped to deepen your faith and your love for Jesus, your hope in him and your confidence in him. As we begin to draw this series to a close, I want us to recognise that we can approach Revelation with fear or faith. And when we start to look at it in some depth, maybe one of the things we need to realise that the recurring theme of Revelation is this: choose your God. You know, I set before you the choice of eternal life or death. And God's heart continues to be that none should perish and all should be saved. And throughout Revelation, despite everything that's going on, there is a heartbeat going through it of God desperate to see people still having that opportunity to turn to him and have faith in him. I think it's maybe possible for us to get caught up in the four horsemen of the apocalypse riding out, of the bowls of God's wrath being poured out, the trumpets being blown, woe, wars, famines, disasters, and how terrible it is. And it might be possible for us to say, where is God's grace and love and mercy and heart and justice in all of that? Let's look at three particular things from Revelation to help us maybe see that in more clarity. And the first one is, I want us to see in Revelation 7, right at the beginning of the tribulation, Jesus marks these 144,000 Jewish believers with a seal marked as his witnesses, that they have a purpose to witness for him through the tribulation. And we touched on this when we began to look at the mark of the beast. And we see that this comes after the first 6 seals have been broken and people are fleeing to the mountains. And in Revelation 6, verses 15 to 16, we see people fleeing to the mountains. And that seems to be a parallel to what Jesus was saying in Matthew 24, verse 16. But after these signs happen, people will flee to the mountains. If we cross-reference chapter 7, verse 1 with Zechariah 6, verse 5, we see that in Zechariah 6, verse 5, the 4 horses that Zechariah describes are described as the 4 winds of heaven. And there are 4 horses linked at the start of a tribulation. And we can speculate a lot of different bits, but there seems to be this picture that there's been a holding back of the winds and the holding back of the enemy, holding back of Satan, holding back of the Antichrist until we get to the tribulation. And as they ride out, it seems that God raises up witnesses for him through that time. The picture we have here is of a sort of perfect Israel. And it suggests that the witnesses for the tribulation will come from the nation of Israel. The understanding of this is probably to be taken that what we have here are Jewish believers who have come to faith in Jesus from realising the futility of trying to follow temple sacrifices and temple worships, that sense of trying to find fulfilment through the law, and through the tribulation realise that they have got it wrong and need Jesus and come to saving faith in Jesus and are being marked for him. And in Revelation 7, verse 14 to 15, we see that standing before the throne of God are the martyrs. And Revelation 14, verse 1 to 5 says that these are those who, the people who are worshipping God in heaven, were the martyrs through the tribulation. It seems that God has raised up a witness for him through the tribulation to point people towards him, and those witnesses of his will suffer for that faith.